Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy today that we're having Dr. Lucia to share her knowledge of more than 9 years in Bahrain and maybe 20 years in other international, more or less. Dr. Lucia is a heritage consultant at the Bahrain Authority of Culture and Antiquity, which is we call it BACA, and working on restoration project in the southern sections of Muharraq, specifically, right? She's a conservations architect and art historian specializing in the preservations of the built heritage in the Gulf region. Her professional background, including heritage projects across Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East, including work in the World Heritage Sites. Her expertise spans the full spectrum of the conservations practice, from preliminary study to execution, right? Executions cover of culture heritage. Dr. Lucia, your floor for you.
Okay. The traditional house. In Muharraq, basically, because I've been working in Muharraq for 10 years, but the truth is that the traditional house is kind of the same in all the areas. You can still find them in Manama, like this one, although this one is not there anymore. But I particularly like this picture because it's one of the few where you can actually see how the traditional house was in the 19th century. Because one of the interesting things for me about the traditional house in Bahrain is that it's not exactly the same. Like, as the time is passing by, it's evolving, as the people are evolving and adapting to the times. So first, to understand like why Muharraq, apart from the little detail that I was working there for the parking pad for 10 years, the truth is also that Muharraq is the place where you can study the traditional house much better than any other place. And that has to be with how the country is and where Muharraq is and what was the role of Muharraq in the history of the country. So this is my favorite map of the country. It's from 1825. I guess that almost everybody knows it. If not, the interesting part of this map is that you can actually see how Bahrain used to be before. So as you can see, like all these areas around Sitra and around Muharraq used to be the sea. The sea during high tide and just like dry land during the low tide. If we go a bit closer, you can actually understand the entire history of the country through this map. For example, well, to understand the interpretation of this map is like all these numbers are like the deep sea, and all this is the areas, the coral reef that was covered with the water during high tide and dry during the low tide. And if you see, if you imagine a moment when the world was working with highways, being the sea, because they could move with ships and boats, while moving through the land was much more complicated and expensive in terms of energy. So you see that the areas to approach the country were here, where Dilmun used to be, Manama, and Muharraq. So the easiest access point for the entire country for millennia was this one, because you could actually come with a boat and through a channel reach this area. That was completely full by the 16th century, end of the 16th century. So then they changed to Manama. That was the second easiest point to reach. So that's why you have here the custom house, the souk, etc. So boats were coming here, downloading the goods, and then distributing through the souk, and then the entire city was growing through that point. And then Muharraq was chosen right because of the exactly opposite reason, that it was surrounded by such a big reef that was very easy to protect. Because back then, boats, even with cannons, they could not reach, like shooting from here, the city that was there. The only way to attack the city was from the south, and for that they had Bumaher Fort and Arad Fort that had cannons to defend the entire city. So for that reason, the Khalifa decided to have the ruling family in Muharraq. That was also surrounded by a city wall, apart from these two forts and 2 or 3 watchtowers, one in Samahi, one in Galali, and probably one in Hit, that were covering all this area to see if any ship was coming to attack the country. So as you can imagine, having Muharraq like a place where the ruling family was settling, all the important families of the country were settling around. Here, my God, go back. So we have like Manama being like the trading city, communicated with Muharraq through the ferry that was coming from Hura to the souk. Again, you can understand the city now. Yes, let's go. The city, you have here the point of arrival of the ferry, which was later the bridge built in 1942, and you have like all the Khalifa district in this area with the palaces, all the most important families around, and all the souk here with the amaranth that were growing from the end of the 19th century till the mid 20th century. And all this part was much less developed since the very beginning. Actually, here you can still see all these brownish, like the darkest areas, are Barasti. And you can see how all this area is mainly in stone houses, while this one remained with the huts until the 50s. Because again, it was very far from the souk, very far from where all the movements were happening. So again, like you can understand even the houses, the type of houses that you are going to find, how old they are, how important they are, according to the shape of the city and how it was positioned according to the location of the sea, the topography of the sea, etc. Okay, so traditional house in the 19th century. The most important thing is the material. With what material were they building the houses? Because depending on the material, you will have certain capacity to build one thing or another. And as you can imagine, back then they have pantries, mainly. So the traditional house were huts. And we do know that the majority of the houses in the 19th century in the country were huts. But not only, they were the most appealing houses. We even have records of travelers coming and saying that they prefer the huts to the stone masonry. Why? Because especially if you were coming in summer, stone house, I kindly invite you to enter in one of those rooms in summer with no AC. It's impossible to be there. You would prefer a hut 1,000 times. Because the architecture had to evolve a lot to be able to hold activities inside during the summer, which was the main issue, because after all, most of the time here is hot, and very few part of the year is really hot, cold, and you would need a stone room to live more comfortable. So, okay, they were using, the very interesting thing is that the pantry is not a tree to build. Absolutely not. It's a kind of wood that is really not for construction. A pantry is not even a tree. It's not true wood. So whatever they managed to use it for construction, even though it was the worst possible tree for construction. And they were using the leaves, they were using the fibers, they were using the trunk to build these huts And they were mastering even to do the amara. They were amara made also as hats. So they were managing to use the materials in a way that they could even do like big spaces with a wood that is not for construction, which is very impressive. In this though, because they are like pretty late images, you see also these poles that definitely are not palm trunks, they are mangrove. And even though you have mangrove in Bahrain, in Tubli, they are obviously not as big as this. These were coming first from East Africa, then from India. But I'm pretty sure that before having the mangroves coming from abroad, that is happening in the second half of the 19th century, they were probably using palm tree. But that is the 19th century, probably in the 18th century, 17th century. But before that, millennia back, we also know from archaeological records that there were tamarisk tree in Bahrain. Now, it's very common in Saudi Arabia. They do this kind of ceilings, I mean, much better wood than a palm tree. So probably they were also using the tamarisk. We are talking about 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, because also like the fauna, the flora of the country was different back then. But by the moment that we are talking right now, 19th century, palm trees. Okay, so the barasti. Barasti, how everybody knows barasti is the term that you use here for the hut house. And it has the main elements, the fence, that as you can imagine is quite fragile because it's made of leaves. An entrance that was like direct. Then we always see this white room, and then these standard rooms that have this pitch roof that are repeated multiple times. So the other interesting thing is that they keep putting these rooms on the corners, no? Separated. Why? Mainly because you have a fence that is really weak, so you need some structure that can give you stability from one part of the fence to another. And this is going to be later important when they turn into stone masonry. Sometimes they were wealthy enough, they could use these walls with stones to have like a better boundary around the house, still doing most of the rooms with huts. But again, stone wall means more money. Why? Because you need the stones that are coming from the bottom of the sea. You are paying someone to get those stones from the bottom of the sea. Then you need a mortar to arrange them. That mortar needs sand and a binder. Producing a binder is kind of expensive because you need to burn the stones like 1,000 degrees, which is not that easy. And even if you are using gypsum, which is the most common binder here in the region in Bahrain, still you need to burn a lot of gypsum, so you need many trees to burn to produce the gypsum. So again, it's more expensive, so it means that it was not the most widespread system. Okay, so again, this is the traditional organization of the hut. So we see that we have these three types of roofs. And this is going to be important when they translate this into masonry. So we have this, I showed you before, this white roof that is for wider rooms, this pitch one, and this flat one. Now, what is the main difference? How they perform when it's raining. So most of the rooms have this pitch shape because they were mud. These mud can withstand with a rain for a while, but they are not waterproofing. So they need the water to go out as soon as possible. While this one is more thought out for ventilation, no? And if you see even it's open, this is more like a shade. So you could have like a small rain, but if you have a strong rain, you need this kind of structure. And then you have these flat ones that were for areas that were not that important, because of course this is not going to support the rain, everything below. it's going to be wet. So animals, storing things that doesn't matter if they are wet. And I said before, the Barasti were the most comfortable areas until you start having electricity, fans, AC, etc. So what we see is that when they start transforming the house from the hut to stone structure, they keep doing, especially this summer area. I keep calling them summer area because I'm sure that is where they were spending most of the time. And you see that it's always located in the north, facing, in the south, facing north. And even when you have fully stone house, they are still creating this summer area with wood as a hut, because it was fully ventilated. They could even woven the sticks and the leaves in a way that they were leaving space in the middle, so it was even more ventilated, not only the upper part. So you see that across the time, this summer space keeps being there. And as late as the 50s, they kept building. It's not like we have all Barasti that are appearing in pictures that are late. No, in the 50s, they were still building it because it was the most cozier during the summer. You have like this wealthy house, clearly very wealthy house. Still, again, the summer space is a hut. And when they transform it into stone, they do this, which is what we call Liwan. You have seen it, but it's the typical of the 19th century that has, again, it's again on the south, facing north, so you don't have the sun during the day. And remember that the wind in Bahrain, main wind, is always coming from the north, so it was perfect. You have shade and you have wind, so it was the most fresh area of the house. And we have some of them, not many. There are a couple of them in Rifah. This we found it in Fakro house during the restoration, and this is from Sheikh Salman house in Muharraq. So they had these huge arches that allow this ventilation and at the same time being shaded. And you can see how it's practically like a translation of whatever they were doing. Obviously, they needed pillars in the middle because you have now like a heavy ceiling. But again, like a translation, these liwans were often also like separated from the rest of the house. Okay, so everybody knows that this is Sheikh Bin Ali house. Pretty complicated house, super complex, very sophisticated. You have these 4 courtyards dedicated to the family, to the king, service, and guest. So when I arrived in Bahrain and I started reading, so like, yeah, the Bahraini house, very complicated. Where do you? Is adapting, which is kind of true, but as a result of evolution. Because even Sheikh Bin Ali, if we see how it used to be at the very beginning, was like this. So it's the family courtyard, what is the original house, and whatever happened later was the addition of these other courtyards according to the needs of the family. And if you see here, I think what you have is again like winter family rooms, summer rooms, direct entrance, public rooms, and multipurpose rooms. And if you see, I think I have it here, exactly. The only thing that happened, that is why Sheikh Bin Ali is my favorite building in Bahrain, because you can still see everything. This was added later, like 1 century later, and these 3 rooms had been slightly modified, but you can still see that they used to be original multipurpose rooms. Now, you enter from here, they transform one of the rooms into an entrance, but originally the access was from here, direct entrance, which is something that we see in absolutely all the buildings from the 19th century and early 20th century. This zigzag entrance is something that happened later. And it happened later especially because from the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, there is a lot of migration. So while at the beginning, all the tribes were living together, they were all family, there was absolutely no need to have protection for privacy because they were all family. It's the moment that the migration comes when they felt threat and start closing this entrance. And we don't see this broken entrance until the beginning of the 20th century. Always before is a direct entrance. Okay, so how was the traditional house in the 19th century? So we can see here that we have the fence, the rooms around, with the main ones, the majlis, the family room, and the liwan, which was the summer room. Interestingly, so you have the fence and you have all these rooms around in exactly same case that the hut was doing. But you remember, in the case of the hut, the rooms were around because they were supporting the fence, right? While here, you don't have that need. But that is how a house is, no? So you have this direct entrance, and then all the rooms are communicated through the courtyard. And even though now you have rooms attached to each other, which was not the case here, because again, we were keeping the fence stable, in this case, expensive, no? If you put two rooms together, you can share a wall and you're saving money. So obviously, when they start doing the stone masonry houses, they started attaching the roofs, but this was not how it used to work. So I find super cute that they never, ever connect rooms to each other. If you want to go from this room to this room, you need to go to the courtyard and go inside the room. And it would have been way easier to go through the wall, but it's not how a house works, because it's not how the house used to work when it was a hut. And this is a super cute phenomenon that happens in architecture all around the world. That is, when a new technology is arriving, it takes time to adapt the material to the function. You can see here when they started using cast iron and steel for architecture, you have the pillars with these beautiful capitals and base that made total sense for stone, absolutely no sense for steel. But that is how a pillar was. So you had to do a capital, you had to do a base. And it took them several decades until they realized that, come on, we don't really need the capitals, we don't really need the base. So same thing. They kept doing the house with stones, but they were thinking the house as a hut. Okay, so more rooms that we were having. We were talking about the fence, which is another of my favorite things because it's super interesting. You see how low the wall is? It's this high. Again, what I said before about privacy. There was no privacy. There was, again, families living together. They were only indicating the perimeter. They were not trying to hide from the exterior. And we have cases like this house, in Suwaid house in Muharraq, that is a pretty recent house. Half of it is done with the cement block, and we find things like this, that you have the boundary wall, which is made of stone, and then the rest of the room is made with cement blocks, because it was done later, because the fence is the first thing that you are always doing. And again, this height. So you can still see and be seen. Another example, this Fausia house, also in Muharraq, very cute house, I must say. And you can still see, I think that I marked it, yes, the boundary house that you can see around. And it's interrupted. Actually, when you see the area from where you enter right now, you can see that there is no boundary wall. These are pillars and furush, which is very strange. But why is this happening? Because the boundary wall was like that. And actually, they were removing all this part of the house. And you even have this very small room that is never a type in Bahrain, because you always have these long rooms. Why? Because that is how the huts were done, right? So rooms are long and narrow. Also because the material was giving that possibilities, but again, always remembering the huts, that is how the houses are. By the way, this is also super important to understand how the urban layout is evolving, because this means that there is a need for space. And one of the things that we discovered while studying all the houses is that many of them, like there's like a period at the beginning of the 20th century that they are breaking houses everywhere. Like you have an entire house and suddenly like they are removing a room, like in several buildings around. And then you start understanding, like the city has reached a moment that it was that packed that it was impossible to go from one place to another without giving a huge round. And then you have these openings of streets that are doing like this, because they are removing rooms from different people trying to reach in a more reasonable way, because remember that it's also super hot. So understanding the evolution of the house is also helping to understand the evolution of the city. Okay, the MASH list. What can I say about the MASH list? Everybody knows. Usually always beside the entrance. We have some of the old ones from the 19th century, like those, and they have this beautiful Al-Khati that I always say bad. I need a Bahraini to say Al-Khati like properly. That was like the refreshing area. We will see it later. So this is like usually the wider room, and they were usually using this. So when they had only the palm trunks, that again is a very bad type of wood, what they were doing is putting up an arch in the middle. So instead of having this distance that was too much, they had an arch in the middle and put it in this direction. So they could do bigger rooms to accommodate people. And it was also like the most decorated room usually, I think, like until today. And the nice thing about this room in Rifa is that it's the original decoration. We even have a picture that I should have included. I'm sorry, I forgot. But I have a picture from 1880 with the room exactly in the same way, but only with the decoration. I should have sorry. Okay. Then the family room that it's again like the standard room, but longer usually, and having the Al-Khati, however it's said, which is again this room at the very end that is like a separated area for refreshing, which makes total sense. Like to have an area, like in the MASH list, if you're receiving a visitor, or also for the family. And at the beginning, it was like a formal wall, thick wall with an entrance. But then that is at the beginning of the 19th century. But then in the second half of the 19th century, they start doing these furush walls, which is like a partition, not a formal room anymore. And very interesting, they usually have like a part of space inside to be able to refresh yourself, an entrance, like direct entrance, so you could get out like the dirty water or whatever without bothering people inside. And okay, farm area, remember that I said this very simple kind of structure, same thing, pillars. They not always had the proper ceiling. Sometimes it was like a something like, yeah, thank you. So that it was part of the house or in a backyard whenever they had a backyard. This is in Murad house, but they had it like in the original entrance of this house was from here. Not like here. You see that they keep doing this. They had an original direct entrance and then they changed to this broken entrance. Broken, like zigzag. And then toilets. Some houses had toilets, backyard, hidden. Okay, so yeah, this is one of the things that I found when I started reading about Bahraini architecture, saying like, very heterogeneous. There are multiple types. And now, I didn't know back then, but now I know that these are not houses. These are parts of houses, that they have been divided, that they have been modified, like they were, what is happening, like the moment that we started understanding how the houses used to be, what is happening is that the moment that you start looking around, it's like, no, the house is here, or used to be here. And what we are seeing is just like a little piece of that house and never the full house. So the interpretation of, what you can make the interpretation of how the Bahraini house was in the second half of the 20th century, when the families were adapting the houses that were receiving from their parents and grandparents, but definitely not the traditional house, if we want to say that the traditional house is what was happening in the 19th century. Okay, do you all know Jalakma House? Have you visited Jalakma House? Okay, so Jalakma House is this weird thing. It's weird, I mean, it's a weird house. It's one of the buildings that we have in the Perlin Path. Everybody knows the Perlin Path? So I don't need to explain that. So this is the state that Jalakma House had when we started. Like, this was the elevation, this is one of the courtyards, this is how the upper room was. And again, pretty weird house. You have like 3 courtyards, not one, and then you have 2 entrances, and you have like street in the middle. So weird Bahraini house, apparently, until you start like analyzing properly. So that is where Jalakma House is nowadays, at Quine, England, within the island. But if you go back enough, you can see that Bumaher Island was the sea. There was nothing, zero. So it's an island that started appearing from the mid-19th century. So go back. And it was growing from here until by the end of the 1920s, finally connected with Muharraq. And again, the house is here. Here is still closer to the sea, but in the 31, it was not directly connected to the sea anymore. Everybody knows how the reclamation is done in Bahrain? Let me explain it. This is a drawing from Kuwait, but the system is exactly the same. Remember that big coral reef during low tide? Okay, so whenever low tide was coming, they were taking stones and building this wall from here, here, and one day they were closing, and when the high tide was coming back, could not enter anymore. And after that, you could start filling it, and that is how they were reclaiming. So it was pretty easy, and they were doing it like very, very fast. And that is like what was happening for Bumaher. Like the entire island is reclaimed. Only like a little part of it between the 2 main mosques was like kind of dry. Okay, so this is the house, and if we zoom in, you can see it here, the weird house. But you need to understand that this is what was happening at the beginning. So we have that the sea was surrounding all the house. These white areas were reclamations done later, and then the yellow one was even later. And the house is this. And this is a warehouse. And if we see it closer, so we do have a house like the traditional had, and then a warehouse that was attached, which the original access from the south, because we had a sea on the north. So these entrances that we have here didn't make sense back then. Okay, so the warehouse is super interesting, but it's like a different typology. It's like what we have in Jalakma House is like 2 typologies attached one to another, and these used to be like the full structure that occupying part of the street. And it looks like this inside. Interestingly, these ones are connecting between each other because this is not a house. Houses don't connect rooms to each other. An Amara is a different thing. And we can even see this is, the picture is from the 59. The plan is what we have, like what we found when we did the survey 10 years ago. And this blue line is how the city used to be in the 31. And if you see closer, you see this little thing? It's reflecting like a little deck that it had, because of course the boats were coming here, so you could put things directly inside. This is right in front of the main door, original door. And then this, of course, was empty, so you could then come here inside and board your boat after leaving the things. Okay, so again, we said this is the house, we have the access from below, so that is the access. What should be happening here? Probably much less, maybe. But this is what we found. Pretty ugly room, but then when we started checking, decoration appeared. And then when we removed everything, it was super full of decoration and it was much, much deeper, which was kind of expected because it was beside the original entrance. So again, this helped us also to understand where things are gonna be. And we found also these pieces. Does it ring any bell? What do you think that these pieces are? They are like these tiny things that and it was actually like this. And what we did is like the survey of all the pieces. So we could start playing with them like a puzzle until we could, it was super nice because we had pieces enough to understand all the feature of the, I mean, this, for example, it was impossible to have it in any of this. It has to be in this area. And we had like all these little decorations that were telling us how all the things was. And then one of the most interesting things of this Alcatí is the only one that we have found out of Khalifa palaces. The rest that have been preserved, they are all within the palaces. Okay, and this other room that is within the house, what we received was like in these conditions, but you can still see that there are certain decorations, and when we removed all the cement layers, etc., we could see like it had also like some decoration. You can also see like the original ceiling was lower and then they raised it. In this case, the Li1, unless there was something in this part that doesn't look like, but we haven't done the study of this part that is still existing, but in worse conditions. The Li1, again, south, facing north, is this that used to be something like this, because this room was built later, and these pillars are still inside. So we did have a Li1 that in this case is right before the majlis, so you could have like the summer area and the winter area right beside. And we have seen in those palaces, and big houses, this scheme being repeated. And then these upper rooms that in this case have completely disappeared, it collapsed, but you still have all the pillars at the bottom that are indicating how it used to be. So we have a big room with a Li1, and it was accessed from here, which is also confirming, again, I mean, we keep finding traces that this was not a street, it was actually rooms to access the house. And it must have looked similar to the one that we have, the Hafiz, that is still in place, that has this kind of interior. Now, this was a revolution. So after having these load-bearing walls that were very thick, everything closed, not much light, not much ventilation, the moment that they discovered that they can actually do pillars and lintels, then that was a big party, because you could break and make openings everywhere and have much more light, much more ventilation. So these started to be the favorite rooms everywhere. And actually, one of the things that we see is that there is a kind of abandonment of the whatever was happening below, because it was not comfortable anymore. You had a much, I mean, and it really works. When you are in one of these rooms with everything open, in the summer, spring works amazingly, even in the summer, when you have like a little breeze, it's enough, it's really nice because it's full shaded. So it's obviously, they started using them much more. The street, what happened with the street? Okay, so obviously at the beginning it was not a street, but you remember that we were seeing the maps before, that this was growing to connect. By the way, it was connected at low tide, and people had to walk every day to get the water, because the only source of water for Muharraq until the beginning of the 20th century was in Muharraq, in Bumaher. So everybody had to come here for drinking water. So this line existed always. So it makes sense that slowly, they were developing the island to connect. And what happened when it connected? Bumaher Street is the most important connection and circulation channel in Muharraq. So they had to connect. So it made a lot of sense just to connect through here. And we do know that by the late 1920s, which is when the connection was likely happening, the family didn't have like good financial moment, so it might have happened that they were having some kind of compensation, giving this room to the Baladilla so they could open and connect the two parts of the island now together. And we see how, like by the 51, it appears covered, but still the circulation is possible. Okay, so then this upper room, the Hafiz, which is the most important room in the house, that we see that had these two rooms and this corridor. That is, when we arrived, it was made of concrete, and it was in very bad conditions. In fact, it was the concrete what failed and collapsed and destroyed part of the lower part, because concrete concrete in the 40s and 50s was not done very. We were having that conversation before. This is a private comment. In the 50s, the concrete was not executed very well, so it was failing quite dramatically sometimes. Okay, so we can see very clearly when we analyze the section of the building in detail that there is no alignment, no? Which is indicating that the lower part and the upper part were done in different moments. So we keep saying this evolution in the house. But we also found the pillars, the location of the pillars of the original corridor that would have looked something like this. This is in Manama, but we even have the same kind of parapet still surviving here. So we can imagine how it used to be. And actually the restoration was done using these pillars, not only because of historical reasons, but also because it's what makes sense structurally, because these pillars are right above the pillars that we have below. Okay, and then just summarizing, we have these rooms that were added here to divide the house, and that is when Jalahma became this kind of house between the two brothers, Sahin and Ali. So at that moment is when the house, also in the 20s, became this way. And then other structures were added, this one in the 40s, early 40s, this late 40s, this in the 60s. So at the end, if you see Jalahma in terms of dating or periods, is this. So it's really important to understand that we are not seeing a house, we are seeing a process. We are seeing like the history of a family that is adapting to whatever is happening with family issues, with financial crisis, etc. So you cannot analyze this kind of house and come with the conclusion that the Bahraini house, it's like multi-typology, but at least you need to understand from where these things are coming. These are not houses, are parts of houses, and the result of an evolution and the history of the family and whatever was happening through it. Yep, the other interesting thing, and I mentioned it before, is that the moment that you start understanding the city, the houses like this, you can translate that to the city. And we had the opportunity to study some buildings that were close to each other, and you can see like this would be like at the beginning of the 19th century, this is the Sheikh Isa Mosque. So you can see that there is no formal city. You have scattered houses and space in the middle, not real streets. Remember the picture that I put at the very beginning in the entrance that was the house isolated? That's why I wanted that picture, because this is how it was looking at the beginning of the 19th century. And what was happening along the time is that it packed until we have what we have today. But again, understanding the evolution of the houses, if you have enough houses, and we have many because of the Berlin Path, gives you a super nice understanding of how the urban layout has evolved. Okay, now I just wanted to finish with how we approach the restoration using the same kind of understanding of the houses. This is just a house. This is also part of the Berlin Path. And this is how we found it. This is the elevation, and this is the courtyard from one side and the other one. And the upper floor had a couple of rooms that had collapsed. We had only the walls that were leaning, but we had to save them. And this area that was for animals in very, very bad conditions. And you see, these were the upper rooms. So again, what we did was trying to understand the house from the sources and from the methodology that we used to date all these rooms and understanding how it used to be. And again, we were having just half house, as usual, and it looks like this. So again, like multiple rooms from different periods, some of them also built and then transformed. Like some of them, for example, this one had a wooden ceiling, and then they changed it to a more stable one. This used to be part of the same, the same room, and then they created a staircase in the middle. Anyway, understanding like the full house, that this used to be actually the summer room, the one, and then they decided to use it for the animals. But if you see, it's not very visible here, but the ceiling, I haven't explained that. You can understand how important a room is according to the type of ceiling that it has. Related to money again, when you have a service room, you have the danshas and the bamboo sticks are orthogonal. But if it's an important room, they are going to put the bamboo sticks crossed. And if it's an even more important room, then they are going to put these decorations in the middle. So the ceiling is giving you an indication of how was the room initially thought out. And in this case, we see that it's the nicest ceiling of the entire house, but it's for the animals, which is telling you that it used to be the summer space and the most important space back at the beginning of the 20th century. Again, these upper rooms that used to be something like this, super nice with like this liwan to enter, and then the room here, which is also telling you that the access was from a staircase coming from here. An Al-Kati, humble Al-Kati, but Al-Kati after all. Very bad conditions. And based on that, we decided how to do the restoration, just removing the things that were harmful for the house and were in bad conditions and keeping absolutely everything else. So we designed the additions just to help to understand the house and to consolidate all the structures that were in bad state. So you can see here like how it used to be and what we did, which is this was a reconstruction done with very bad materials, because that is one of the things that we have been fighting with during the last 10 years, like what kind of materials to use to make the house stable. And so we removed it, and because it was supposed to be for an artist, since we had to remove this, we just left a big opening to bring works of art in and out. And above, we brought back the room that was lost, but with new materials. And you can see it here, and also using it to support the wall that was about to collapse. So you can see here that we just eliminated the elements that were like in bad conditions, and the rest we brought it back, just clean everything. We mostly clean, and added this staircase because the existing one is not that comfortable, and this area that had collapsed we transforming into the kitchen. This farm area is now a fantastic studio that you can use because you have shade, because again it's only one, so it's on the south facing north, and it has a fantastic ventilation and not exposure to sun. And as you see, this wall that was about to collapse now is supported by this room. There is a beam here that is supported by the rest of the structure. The structure is designed to remember how it used to be. So this pillar is where the pillar used to be, this other pillar is where the other pillar used to be, and these lines are the lines of the back gear window. So you can understand the original structure. So this is how it looks from inside. And this is more or less the look from the general one. Oh, back. This is from inside. Again, the same system. This beam is supporting the wall. And then this one that had lost the ceiling, we just made like transparent structure so you can move, but not bringing back the ceiling. Didn't make sense. Also, it's not even clear that they had like a formal ceiling there. This is how it's looking from the other side. Like we really needed something to support it. And this is, we recover all the back gear windows, so now you can use it. This is from another house, because I had this nice picture. But they are super, super nice. Whenever the light is coming, like in midday, it's coming inside, and it is making the rooms look super, super nice with this. Like, and you can even open and have the ventilation in the way that used to be. And the Alcati, that now is a toilet. So you can still refresh yourself, and we just close with a window, so you can use it like comfortably, because otherwise it's weird. And that's it. The rest of what we have done is just cleaning the structure. And this used to be the kitchen, but because we were moving the kitchen to the other part, we transformed this into a bathroom. And just clean. And that's it. Thank you very much.